رب رحيم مشفق.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We looked at the Jehovah's Witnesses and we looked at some of the beliefs they had. And I encourage you to go to YouTube and type in the story of the Jehovah's Witnesses or the history of the Jehovah's Witnesses. They have a little animated series. It's about 3.5 minutes long that you at home should watch, where it gives you some of the doctrines of the Jehovah's Witnesses, especially what they believe that Jesus was actually the Archangel Michael. So it's important for you to watch the little clip. So watch it yourself. It's only 3.5 minutes. It gives you an overview of what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. The same thing as you can do today is also have a look at what the Seventh-day Adventists believe by typing in Seventh-day Adventist into YouTube. And there's a clip there that you can watch also explaining some of the flawed doctrines within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So these will just help you as a refresher. Today we're giving you extra information that you wouldn't have got on YouTube, that you won't get from the internet. So we'll continue today looking at the next major Christian group that we'll come across in today's society, evangelical groups. Because you're interested in those people that you're going to come across. In Africa, the fastest growing groups are the Seventh-day Adventists, along with trailing behind them the Jehovah's Witnesses. Worldwide, it's the Jehovah's Witnesses leading, Seventh-day Adventists trailing behind. So both of these are very, very big. Yes, there are other people doing evangelism. Yes, Baptists and Anglican and Methodist and Presbyterian are doing it, but they're not doing it in such big scale with so much money and resources behind them. So let's have a look at the Seventh-day Adventists, or the adventurers as I like to call them. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is the largest of the cult groups, which is the Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, and Mormons. The Mormons are the smallest. The statistics differ between who you speak to. The Jehovah's Witnesses claim they're the largest. Seventh-day Adventists claim they're the largest. Independent research says that the Seventh-day Adventists at this point are ahead. And it's simply because of default, not by church membership, but I will show you and explain to you why they are larger, inshallah, during the course of this lecture. So the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a group of churches that were started in about 1840s. Remember we looked at the Jehovah's Witnesses? Same time period. Mormons, same time period. The Seventh-day Adventists, same time period. They all grew in what was happening at the time in America when people had given up. They were looking away from religion, and so these three groups reinvented religion, if you want to put it that way, within Christianity. And so in the 1840s, they were part of a group called the Millerites, or the Millerites. M-I-L-L-E-R, Miller, was the person who started the movement. So some of them call them Millerites, whatever you want to call them. Miller was the person they were following, and they come from that group. So the Seventh-day Adventists are direct breakaways from there. Remember, where's the Jehovah's Witnesses headquarters? Anybody remember? Next to the Brooklyn Bridge. Huge, massive Brooklyn Bridge. There you have the Watchtower headquarters. And in New York as well, just across the other side of the bridge, the Seventh-day Adventist headquarters. And a little bit, few states up, the Mormons headquarters. So you have this trinity all coming from the same country. So the Millerites came and they started to congregate, and they started to tell people at that time that they needed to correct their teachings. And most of the ideas for the Miller group, or the Seventh-day Adventists as we know them today, or those who came, their ancestry, they came across a verse in the book of Daniel, in Daniel chapter 8, verse 14. Daniel and Revelations are two books that play the greatest role for cults developing in society today. If a new Christian cult is going to be born, it's going to be born out of reading the book of Daniel or reading the book of Revelations. Both of the books are as doubtful as can be. Even the Jewish scholars doubt the book of Daniel is authentic. I can tell you the book of Daniel is a forgery, without a doubt. I can give you many, many reasons why the book of Daniel is a problem. The biggest one is the literary evidence, the evidence of the literature itself. The first 7 chapters of Daniel are written in the first person, and the rest of the chapters are written in the second person. That's a big problem already. It means the person who wrote the first half is not the same person who wrote the second half. Many of the stories there are so ridiculous that you have to really come from the 1960s and had long dreadlocks and were taking things that you shouldn't be taking to understand the book of Daniel. Revelations is very much the same. So the book of Daniel is to the Jews as Revelations is to the Christians. Most Christians don't want to deal with the book of Revelations because it's just too weird. And most Jews don't want to deal with the book of Daniel because it's just too weird. Those cults that want to succeed, that's where they go to find the information from, because you can interpret anything you like. You've got 7-headed beasts, and you've got dragons, and you've got a person looking like half a hawk and half a human. You've got all sorts of strange things inside there, little crowns, big crowns, trumpets blasting, seals being opened. You want to find weird stuff, that's where you go. If you want to prove a doctrine, that's where you go. Because it's not clear-cut. You can interpret it any way you like. So this is why you find the Jehovah's Witnesses love that book. The Seventh-day Adventists live in those 2 books. And the Mormons, well, they just got a whole new game all on their own. But specifically the Seventh-day Adventists, you will find them everywhere you go. For the last 140 years, they haven't been around exactly that long, but from the Miller Group, you could say they've been around that long. Let's give them 150 years they've been around. They haven't stopped preaching from the book of Daniel, because that's their trump card. That's the card that's going to win converts. So when you're talking to a Seventh-day Adventist, get them out of the book of Daniel. Get them out of the book of Revelations and say, fine, fine, fine. Let's talk about other things. You can bring us back to Daniel later and back to Revelations later. They will not leave those books, because without those books, they are basically naked. There's nothing. They're just standing there like, what do I do now? So be very, very sure they're going to pull you back into Daniel and Revelations. They're going to make you go to one of their study courses or read one of their books on Daniel or Revelations. If you want to understand how to deal with a Seventh-day Adventist, you do an independent study of the book of Daniel. Don't worry about Revelations. They're more worried about Daniel anyway. So even though they bring in the book of Revelations to substantiate their beliefs on what Daniel says, they're interested in the 7 weeks of Daniel, where Daniel deals with the 7-week period. So if you can find books written by the Baptists on the book of Daniel, read it. If you can read books that the Catholics have written about Daniel, read it. If you can read information written about that the Jews have written about Daniel, read it. And then read what the Seventh-day Adventists said. None of those guys will have agreed with what they said. So sometimes when you want to study comparative religion, you have to look at what the opposing sides are saying. So don't just read their documents. Don't just try and figure it out on your own either, because it's just too confusing. And you're never going to figure it out. You can read it as a book and go, well, I'm lost already. So obviously the best people that will know about the book of Daniel are not going to be Christian. It's going to be Jews. It was their book written in their time about their people. So if you want to know anything about Indian politics or Indian culture, it's no use going to a Mexican and asking a Mexican, can you tell me about Indian politics and Indian culture? He will only know what he's heard, not what he's experienced or seen or known from ancestors and cousins and relations and all the rest. So it's better to go to the source. The source to find out about Jewish belief, Jewish doctrine, Jewish culture is from a Jew, obviously. So let's go to them when we're talking about the book of Daniel. So did the Seventh-day Adventists go to the Jews and ask them? Not a chance, because they would have said to you guys are crazy. So when we look at the Seventh-day Adventists, I know I'm saying this over and over and over, that's the thing they're going to say to you. So even be prepared for it right now. They're going to talk to you about 2 major points. One is they're going to talk to you about the fact that you are keeping the wrong day, and if you do not keep the Sabbath, you're doomed. If you do not keep a Saturday holy, there's no excuse for not keeping the Saturday as far as they're concerned. Like the Jehovah's Witnesses with the blood transfusion, they will never ever take a blood transfusion, even if they're going to go to jail. Even if they get shot for not taking it, they will still not take the blood transfusion. Seventh-day Adventists are just as fervent, just as militant about keeping the Sabbath. There's not a chance that they won't keep it. So that's the first thing. Second thing, they're going to take you to Daniel. And they're going to want you to get involved in studying the book of Daniel. So be aware that's what's coming when you talk to them. They will fight, and they will fight, and they'll fight, and they'll fight, and they'll fight for that Sabbath. No matter what. They will lose the entire Christianity. They will not give up the Sabbath. So I'm just warning you, because I have come across these guys in lectures and talks, and no evidence is going to give them. They'll give up everything else. They'll even throw their prophetess. They have a prophetess, a female prophet, whose name is Ellen White. They will throw her into the fire, no problem. They will, okay, fine, she was bad, without a problem. But they'll never give up the Sabbath. So it's a long fight ahead of you, those people who are going to be dealing with Seventh-day Adventists, especially on this issue. So the Adventists believe that by reading the book of Daniel, in Daniel chapter 8, verse 11, that God or Jesus or Christ entered into the most holy places of heaven's sanctuary, and that he will come from that holy place in the second coming. Let's take a break. When we get back from the break, we'll continue, inshallah.
An evil is approaching. A gap has appeared in the barrier of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, like this. This is part of a hadith that was spoken over 1400 years ago. And if it was near then, imagine how near it is now. My name is Muhammad Tim Humble, and in this series we explore the hadith of Sahih Muslim that speak of the trials and tribulations that are to come in the end of days.
Know and understand the signs of the final day to increase your taqwa and protect your iman in end of days. Tonight at 11:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 12:30 p.m. India on Peace TV. Dialogue. Discussion. Debate. Rebuttal. Conclusion.
Eliminate misconceptions about religion. Get enlightened.
Witness Dr. Zakir Naik in a battle of words in Crossfire. Tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 10 a.m. India on Peace TV.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we're talking about the Seventh-day Adventists believing different doctrines than most other Christians believe. And from the very, very early stages, they found the book of Daniel exciting, one that they could use and come up with all sorts of strange doctrines and beliefs from. And they believe that because of reading Daniel chapter 8, verse 14, that the earth must be cleansed. And that the way that the earth was cleansed is by Jesus, peace be upon him, coming to earth, to cleanse this earth of the problems. And that Jesus is now sitting in his holy sanctuary. And that he will now come back to planet Earth at the second coming. And then there will be a big war that will take place. And he'll win all the rest. But we'll get to all that, inshallah, as we go through. So this was the thing that started off the Seventh-day Adventist movement. Before they even kept the Sabbath, by the way. The doctrine of this whole Daniel interpretation came long before they even became Sabbath keepers. So the Daniel fixation took place before they even kept Sabbath. So they were not called Seventh-day Adventists, they were called Millerites. They were following the Miller group. And then they broke away for whatever reason. I don't want to go into all that because that'll be like 4 episodes just on the reason why. So they broke away from that, and then only did the Sabbath idea start to develop and evolve. So it's not a thing that started in the very beginning. The Daniel adventure was there right from the very beginning. And so one of the people who started this idea of the Sabbath keeping wasn't Ellen White herself, the prophetess. It was a man by the name of Joseph Bates. And Joseph Bates was the person who proposed the idea that who said that we must stop keeping the Sabbath? And who said that a Sabbath is a Sunday? In fact, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses are correct on not keeping the holidays and Easter and Christmas and happy birthday and all that nonsense, and they're correct on that 100%, they also are 100% correct if you're going to go according to what the Bible says in the Old Testament and New Testament, that all Christians should be keeping Saturday, not Sunday. There's nowhere that it says that they should change the day of worship to Sunday. So they're right. But that doesn't mean that they now must exclude every other thing and only focus on the facts of the Sabbath. So yes, we agree with the Seventh-day Adventists that the interpretation of the biblical narrative as it says, keep the Sabbath, is correct. So we're not even interested in debating them on that. The question they will now say is, well, Areeb, if you're saying that you should keep the Sabbath, why aren't you keeping the Sabbath? Because we're not under Christian teaching. We're not Christians. We're not Jews. We're Muslims. And we have better reasons why we keep days. We have days that make sense. Our God did not rest on the Sabbath. He did not take a day off and go, oh, that was exhausting. As a human God, I need a day off. So the idea of a God taking a day off is absolutely unacceptable to us. A God who dies for 3 days and is in hell for 3 days and then comes out of hell is not acceptable for us. So if you want to know why we don't want to keep the Sabbath, that's two main, big, massive reasons. We don't even need to actually even speak about anything else. Other than the fact that every single day for a Muslim is a sanctuary day. That's a term they like to use, sanctuary. Which means every single day we believe in being in the sanctuary of Allah. In other words, in a state of worship. We don't have to go to a building to be in the sanctuary. We don't have to go to a temple to be in the sanctuary. Every single day we are in the sanctuary of Islam, in the sanctuary of submitting to Allah. Because constantly we are in a state of submission to Allah. We should be. And when we notice that we're not, we recommit ourselves to submitting. So we are constantly in the sanctuary, in a term that they would understand. So the first forerunner in this idea, the person who was the flag bearer of Sabbath keeping, was this man named Joseph Bates. So many of them will say that the revelation or the idea of Sabbath keeping was the original idea of the Seventh-day Adventists. It wasn't. It was still in the Miller times. The man who started this idea, of course they jumped onto it and thought, oh, well, this is not a bad idea. We can use this as well. And so for about 20 years, the Adventist movement consisted of a very small little group of breakaways from the Millerite group. Very small community. And these people had their own magazine or newspaper, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses started their own magazine and newspaper. The reason for this is to propagate what you believe. And this was under the rough leadership of a man by the name of James White. And James White, he was bringing out this periodical paper, and it was called the Adventist Review or the Sabbath Herald, or sometimes they were called and the Sabbath Herald. So this was the publication, a newspaper that was given out in those days. And so people were encouraged to embrace this new doctrine. First doctrine that they wanted people to accept is that you needed to keep a Saturday and not a Sunday. They believed that there was a heavenly sanctuary that was recorded in the book of Daniel, where Jesus was now in this heavenly sanctuary, as found in Daniel chapter 8, verse 14, as we mentioned earlier. They believed in a conditional immortality. That immortality is conditional. We'll go into what that means in future episodes, inshallah. And they believed in the pre-millennium return of Jesus Christ. There are three standpoints that Christianity have about the return of Jesus, peace be upon him. How they see his return. One says that it's called the pre-millennium phase, where Jesus will return before all the fighting and all the wars and all the killing takes place, and all those good guys will be taken off planet Earth, and they'll be saved from all the punishment and all the torment and all the destruction that will take place. So those saints, as Christians will use it, will be raptured, which is no such thing in the whole Bible as raptured. But anyway, theology is theology, and what the Bible says is a whole different thing. So these premillennialists believe that they will go through no pain, no suffering, nothing. They will just be disappeared, and they're going to be beamed up to the mothership, and they'll be fine. Then you have the millennials believe that they will be here for a period of time. They'll go through a certain amount of suffering. Trumpets will blast. Jesus will come. Then they will go. And then there's the post-millennials that believe they're going to stay here through everything. They're going to suffer, go through torment, going to be tested on their faith. All this pain and suffering is going to take place. So obviously, this one is the better pill to swallow by most. So a lot of people prefer to be pre-millennials. Before Jesus comes, before the millennium at 1,000 years apiece, then they get taken off planet Earth. The other group, in the middle, not so popular. You're going to suffer a little bit, but not too much. And then the other group, they just want to suffer the whole way through. Those are even smaller group. So which one is true? None of them. It's all made up anyway. So all their versions don't have really strong scriptural basing. All of them will give you scriptures. All of them come from which two books? Daniel and Revelation. So if we find maybe some Mark said something, or Luke said something, or Philip said something, or Titus said something, that would be too simple. So you have to take the vague books. Get your ideas from vague books. So they believe in the pre-millennium return. Millennium means, how long is a millennium? 1,000 years. So they believe that before this 1,000 years of peace on earth, remember what the Jehovah's Witnesses believe? There's going to be 1,000 years of peace on earth. Then what happens? Satan is released back onto earth again, causes havoc, and sees who wants to be faithful and true. So like, what's the point? It's a very odd thing to do. It's like the two resurrections. I mean, you die, according to Christianity, you die, and you go to heaven or hell. And then when Jesus returns, and there's the final judgment, you'll be pulled out of heaven and hell again to go back to heaven or hell again. It's a pointless exercise when you think about what does that mean. Because many Christians will say absent in the body, present with the Lord. That's the expression that is used. When you die, you go to heaven or hell. So then why is there a second judgment? So in the same way, we've got this very vague understanding of why must we be perfect and have absolutely no problems in life. We don't know how to sin. We don't do any wrong. We're perfect creatures for 1,000 years. We don't die. We live on earth. Satan is released to tempt us, and then he gets destroyed and thrown into the lake of fire along with all the people who followed him. So what happens to all those people for 1,000 years that went to hell when you died, got pulled out of judgment, got put back into hell, and then what happens for that 1,000 years? You get pulled back out again at the end of that and go back to hell again. So the whole thing is very, very confusing. Even a Christian battles to explain it to you. So this is the major doctrines that set them apart. By the way, some religions, Christian religions, outside of the Seventh-day Adventists have parts of this in their belief, but not all of these. Some of them will believe that about the heavenly sanctuary as mentioned in Daniel, but they don't believe in the pre-millennium issue. Some will believe in the pre-millennium issue, but they won't believe in having to keep the Sabbath. So they might have some of them, but not all of them. And this is also why we find that the Jehovah's Witnesses are over here, and the Seventh-day Adventists are here, and the Protestants are there. They're closer to the Protestants, except, in fact, the Protestants have accepted, not all of them, some have accepted the Seventh-day Adventists as part of the Protestant. So they've joined the other 29,999. And Jehovah's Witnesses are sitting there still. So, and that's because some of their doctrines you'll find inside the rest of Christianity. Now, Ellen White is a woman who came along at the early stages of the religion. Her husband and another man were more important in the beginning stages. But then she claimed to have visions and dreams. And this was the time of the cowboys and the Indians and all the other things happening in those days. So people were sort of open to anything. You know, they were selling little bottles that would help your hair grow and selling little bottles to make you stronger. Oh wait, it's the same as today. And so people were believing on all this nonsense, believing in like miracle cures. You take a tablet and you could lose weight. Take a tablet and your hair will grow. That's what they're believing back in those days, the little bottles. Similar to what we have today. Just now we have better advertising campaigns to sell you the lie. But what we see in this period of time is that Joseph Bates, James White, and Ellen White were like the main characters. And Ellen White became the most well-known because of her dreams and visions that she had. Next, we invite you to Tune in again as we explain a little bit more about Ellen White and who she is and how the Seventh-day Adventist movement got started, how we can do dawah to them, inshallah. So for me, Areeb Islam, and those here in the audience, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.